Welcome to today's tutorial on Microsoft Excel, and today we will be concentrating on pivot tables. As always, our data is presented by Eddie Lowe from Eddie Lowe LLC. Visit us on the web at www.eddie-lowe.com. So let's look at today's agenda. What we're going to be doing is creating a pivot table. We'll format the table. We'll create custom columns, slicers for filtering, and some common errors that we may see in processing our pivot table. So let's move on over to Excel. Now here we are in our Excel spreadsheet, our workbook, and inside of this worksheet I've got our first set of data. Now we could have collected this data by manually inputting or downloading from some kind of database, a project management software, AutoCAD, or just some other means, even SharePoint. So we've got this data, and again, we're back into a format that it's okay, but it's not giving us the complete picture of all of our data, and we want to format this and be able to report on it. So the tools that we're going to use for this is the pivot table. The way that we can create a pivot table um, is by coming over to our Insert tab, and from our Insert on the left hand side under the Tables we have Pivot Table. Now, Excel can go ahead and grab automatic data if you're inside of it and format it for a specific range, or we can come in and highlight it all of it ourselves, or we can highlight all of the rows so that that way if we ever add data, we can just refresh our table and we don't have to change our data selections. So let's go ahead and do that. And we want to put this into a new worksheet. Here we are in our new worksheet that it's created on a new sheet for us, and we now have our pivot table fields, and these are going to go into this area right here. The easiest way to move our data is going to be dragging and dropping. So if we place data field into our rows column, everything is going to fill into our rows over here. If we go with columns, then it'll become a column header. Typically, you'll see most of your data being placed into the row cell. So let's look at our project manager. So I can bring it down, drop it, and we list all of our rows. You can see I have a blank in here, and this is because we did highlight the entire columns. So we can remove those by coming in, hitting the drop down, and we can just select it and tell it to remove the blank if we want, but we don't have to. It's just for reporting formatting. It just makes it a little bit cleaner. Now, one of the things that we'll want to do is we'll want to put some information against these project managers. So let's look at aligning the profit that our project managers have made. So we can drag and drop that information down into the values field. As you can see here on the value fields, if there was a number for that field, it automatically formats to a number uh, and into a summation. We can change what is being calculated and also format that data by coming into our uh, field right here and clicking our down arrow, and we can tell it to change our go into our value field settings. From here we can change the name of the sum of the profit. So if we wanted to call that the net income, we can just type that in, hit enter, and as you can see it changes the header for that column. Let's come back over and let's go back into the value field settings, and you can see here that there's all of the calculations that we can do. We can count all of the pieces of data that correspond to our project managers. We can average what the project manager's net income or profit is. We can look for the max, the min, or multiply all of those, standard deviations, etc. So let's just keep it on sum. But let's go down now to our number format. And as you can see here, this is similar to our formatting that we have just for our regular sales. So we can come in now and tell it, hey, let's look at make this currency. Let's get rid of our symbol here, 2 decimal places, and click OK. We click OK again, and now you can see that we have our formatting. Uh, One of the other things that you can see that the pivot table is automatically doing is coming in and doing a grand total of our sales. Um, Looking here in our pivot table analysis, we could now switch over to our design tab. And if we want to get rid of that, we can come in and tell it all to turn off. So this is how you turn those summations on and off, those grand totals. And you can turn it on for the rows and columns. You can turn it on for rows only. You can turn it on for columns only. So let's go ahead and turn it back onto the columns and automatically do it for rows and columns. You can also format how your table looks. Similar to doing tables, you have our preset design tables, and if we drop down, we can see the different formattings that we have. So if we want to make it green or blue or whatnot, we can do that. We can also come up here and click our banded rows so that if we change it now, it will make our rows every other color. We can come back in and also we can create our own styles if we want to do that. So let's just make this into a nice, easy to read type format. Let's go with this one. Uh, so we come in and we could also do banded columns if we have multiple different columns. So we can unhighlight that. We can also change how we uh, present this information. So we can show it in a compact form, which is the default, into an outline form, um, and then also we have a tabular form. And these become a little bit clearer if we were to add more rows. So our columns, let's go ahead and do that right now and add in maybe our expenses, and maybe we want to add in our revenues. So if we come in and now we've got that, and now let's look at our reports. Here in the compact, it just compresses and automatically uh, resizes our columns to where everything is or filling in the maximum amount of the cells. We can come in and do the outline, and we can come in and do the tabular form. So again, we've got our sums, our expenses, and our profits. Now let's say, for instance, we didn't have profits inside of our previous table. So we have the sum of expenses and the sum of revenues, and we need to find the difference in the revenue expenses to calculate the profit. Well, we can do that now by coming back over to our pivot table analyze in our row in our ribbon bar, and we can come in now and tell it over here on our field items and sets, click down, and now we will want a calculated field. So in our calculated field, we can give it a name. So let's just call it our net income, and it automatically puts a 0 in. We want to get rid of the 0. Now let's find our fields that we can use to calculate our net income. So our formula would be our revenue. We can click there and we can double click to insert it, minus our expenses. And we could also click by doing insert field. So let's go ahead and say add that, or if we wanted to create another one, or we could just say OK. So now we have our net income right here, and it automatically places it in. If we did everything correctly, it should equal our profit. So here we see that it does equal our profits. Now, one of the other ways that we can use Excel is, let's say, for instance, we want to look at this against regions, and let's put it into our columns. And you can see now all of our regions are across the top. Our project managers are still down here on the side, but because the project managers have some of them have multiples, such as um, or here in our sum of revenue, we can see that we do each one of these is now broken down. Well, we don't like that formatting, so we can drag and drop each of those and have our sum of expenses in each of the ribbon. So you can rearrange your data just by dragging and dropping. So now we have all of our sums in here by each of our regions. Let's go ahead and move the regions out of our columns, and let's say we want to go ahead and sort by our regions, and that's where we can put filters um, into our pivot table. So let's grab the region again, drag and drop into our filters quadrant, and we come up and we can now select a specific region and click OK. Now we just have the north. If we want both regions or multiple regions, we can come in, select the multiple items, and say, give me the north and the south. And now we have filtered that data, and our grand totals automatically come and update. So that's some of the benefits of being able to use a pivot table, is that we can select our data and be able to use all of this information. Uh, if we want some way to do this quickly, let's go back to our revenues, and let's just remove this calculated column that we had. And we can come in now and let's go back over to our pivot table analyze, and you can see right here we have this little tool called an insert slicer. Now we click the insert slicer, and let's say now we're wanting to format against the regions again and filter those out. We can click that, and now you can see all of our regions are highlighted. Rather than having our filter up here, it's now here, and we can click these to be able to quickly format or grab our data. As you can see on this one, it's just doing one at a time, but we can come in and click this button and it will allow us to do multiple pieces of data. We can also um, remove the filter. So let's say that we just had all of these items selected. We hit the remove. Now we have all of our data again. This becomes uh, really easy for creating custom dashboards with your data if you're wanting to look for information and just come in and find specific items that you need without having to do click with your format. So that's the slicer that we have. If we want to remove the slicer, we can just highlight it and we can hit the delete key to be able to remove that slicer. Something else that we want to look at with our data table is that sometimes we will get some errors in our data. So let's look over here at our second piece of data. And as you can see, we have information. Again, we've pulled it from some kind of source. Uh, so let's go ahead and put a pivot table right here to collect our data. So we'll come in and we'll click Insert. We'll do a pivot table, and we want a specific range. So let's grab this range, and we want it in our existing worksheet. And since we highlighted a cell when we said insert, it gives us our location as that cell. So now we'll click OK, and let's build our pivot report or pivot table. So let's go back in against our project managers, or let's do the sales managers this time. And we have our sales managers, and we want to find out how much of the expenses and revenues again were gathered. So let's grab our revenue, and let's grab our expenses. Now you can see that we automatically defaulted to a count of the revenue rather than the profit of our revenue. Uh, so we come down and we click our data and we say value field settings and we want it to sum that data. Well, now we have a sum of 0. When we have to ask ourselves why is it a sum of 0? Obviously, if we come over here and we have all of this information, it should sum up for us to some number greater than 0. So a key thing to look out for is sometimes your data could be exported to Excel in a number or a text format rather than a number. And a quick way of changing that data over to a number versus a text is we can highlight that row. We can come up to data. We can click right here on text to columns, delimited, and then just hit finish. Now you can see all of our data has come into rows, but our pivot table is still not showing our sum. So to refresh a pivot table or to gather new data, we can come in, click it, and tell it to refresh. Now you see that we have our data. So that's one of the biggest common uh, issues that I will see. People will say, hey, it's not calculating a field, and they've got numbers in, you can see it, but it's a text and it's not a number field, so we need to convert it over to a number field. So that's how we can calculate that. Maybe we also have the wrong data in our field and we need to add more information or to switch that data. So let's come back over to our pivot table analyze, click our change source data. We can change our data and say, okay, where is the information? Maybe it wasn't this table we needed, maybe instead it was this table. So we click OK, and now you can see we have the additional fields that we had, such as the profit. It wasn't in this table, it was in another table. So again, you can do that by change data source. And again, you can refresh by clicking here. Um, so this pretty much wraps up the big key items of pivot tables. And in a later video, we will go into charting pivot tables. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please comment below and I'll answer those as soon as I can. Also, if you'd like to see any specific topics on Microsoft Excel or another Microsoft Office product, please comment below. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. And feel free to visit us at www.eddie-lowe.com. Again, thank you.